This is a second video interview given by Paul Abraham, and this was played to the court this week. The detectives tell Paul Abraham they want to fill in some blanks. Paul says, "I didn't know what to do. I was really bad down." The detective says, "The police released some doorbell footage, and it was in order to identify someone who was on that CCTV footage who we believe could assist us with our inquiries at the time. Have you seen that?" Paul says, "I seen it on the telly, yeah." He says he recognised himself, and he also clarifies what he was wearing at the time. The detective says, "During that day, did anything happen of significance?" Paul says, "I went to work. I was looking forward to the match. You didn't really get a Monday night game. I went to Tesco, got a few cans, and went to me mates. Then other people come just before the match. I'm there nearly every day." The detective says, "Would you have spoken to him first hand or on the phone?" Paul says, "I can't really remember. I just knew he'd be in anyway before the match because he always is. He gets home about 5:30 from work, and I got there about 6, 6:15 or something." The detective says, "So what time did you finish work?" Paul says, "I usually got home for 4, no matter what. It's just a normal day." The detective asks where the house was where he watched the match. Paul says it was his mate Timmy's. He says, "He's one of my best mates. I've known him all my life." The detective asks who else was there. Paul says, "Just me and Timmy from the start. I didn't even see his mum. I think she might have been in work. She usually answers the door." Paul was quoted as stating that they watched the match in the house, in his bedroom, at the back of the house. The detective asks, "Is that normally where you'd watch the match?" And Paul would say, "In the bedroom, yeah. We've been playing on the game at first, because he loves his computers." Paul says he arrived about 6 o'clock, but he's not quite sure. Round about that time anyway. The detective asks, "Who was the first to join and what time?" Paul says, "Timmy's cousin was coming with his mate. They're always there as well as watching the match, about 7:30. I don't really know what time to tell you the truth." Paul also mentioned that Jack and Lewis was also there. The detective asked Paul, what were you talking about?" And Paul answers, "The football, just normal things." He says that's when Joseph comes. I think the match had already started or was just starting. Joseph was the last person there. The detective asked him, "Do you know how he got there?" He says, "No, the match starts, you're drinking. I was drinking a few Stellas. They don't drink, only on special occasions. They were just on the wacky-backy, basically." "What happened during the match? Did anyone say anything?" says the detective. "No, it was just about football. I'm a blue, you see, and they're all reds. So there was a bit of banter." "Did anyone make any calls?" says the detective. "I'm not too sure. Everyone was getting calls off their girls or mates. I wasn't really paying attention." "I've been trying to think. It was just a normal day, basically. Then obviously, when we left, it's all changed. I don't think anyone even went to the shop or anything. They just got what they needed before they came. I was the only person drinking, yeah." The detective asked when the game finished. Paul says, "I think it was about 9:30 it finished, 9:45. I was just thinking of making the chippy, because it shuts at 10 or 10:30, then going in. I'm usually asleep by 10 or 10:30. He says he went to Harry's, the one next to ours, at Dovecot Shops. Obviously I didn't end up going like. The detective says, "What was said at the end of the match?" Paul says, "Nothing basically. They stayed and me and Joseph had walked off. My plan was going the chippy, but I think he was going home to his mum's. We had wacky-backy and might have seen the police, so we cut through." The detective says, "Were you going somewhere with Joseph?" Paul says, "No, walking down with Joseph, that was it. I just thought he was going home. His mum lives round the corner, basically. We both walked out and went on to King's Heath then." The detective asks, "Is there anything more you remember now?" Paul says, "It was quiet. The streets were quiet." The detective asks, "There's usually people standing outside Dovecot Labour Club. Because the match had just finished, you think there would have been. There was no one there," says the detective. He asks, "Did you look over in that direction?" Paul says he did. He said he turned left onto King's Heath Avenue, and the detective asks him what he saw. Paul says, "Nothing at all. That's what's been puzzling me. It just happened, just like that. Usually you hear a car or motorbike. There was just nothing. He's just come from behind." The detective asks, "Is there anything else you remember about what happened? Any details about the man?" No, I don't really look, to tell you the truth," says Paul. "I thought he would have just left him. He didn't, he carried on walking straight after him." "Can you recall anything he did or said?" says the detective. Paul says, "No, nothing. I heard a lady saying, 'What's going on?' I heard someone say, 'What's going on?' I might have made a noise in her back garden." The back garden was on King's Heath Avenue. "I heard a lady opening her window shouting, 'What's going on?' That's when I've heard the other shots." The detective says, "When have you heard the first bangs? You told me Joseph stumbles, doesn't he?" The first bang was really loud. It was like a big shock," says Paul. "As soon as we went to run, again there's been another one straight away. It must have hit Joseph and he's fell over. I basically hopped over him and gone through the gate." The detective asks, "Do you recall anything being said at that point?" Paul says, "Joseph was saying, 'Please don't, that's all I've heard.'" "Anything more you remember about the gunman and what he was wearing?" Paul says, "No, I thought he would have ran. I thought 2 shots and that's it. That's when I've ran then." The detective says, "You have gone through the back garden on King's Heath. You confirm that's you on CCTV footage. From there, where do you go and what do you do?" Paul says, "That's me coming out, yeah. I just went down Finch Lane then. Right the way down Finch Lane. Then I've come back through and I've come out on the top. I've seen loads of police cars coming from everywhere. I ran across and ran through, and there's a pathway by the bingo." The detective asks, "After it's happened and you're on your way home, have you spoken to anybody?" Paul says, "No, I got in my sister's was in. That's when I told my sister. I didn't know anything about a baby then. I didn't know nothing about a little baby. I just said the street was dead. There was nothing. There was no one out at all. I thought it would have been rumours, the internet. I forgot about Joseph then. I was just thinking about the baby then. I was upset about Joseph at first because I thought he was dead. Then I found out about the baby." The detective asks, "Can you recall, prior to seeing Joseph at Timothy's on Monday, before that, when was the last time you saw Joseph?" Paul says, "It might have been the weekend.